Hello and a warm welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Humor. This is mini episode 33. Many thanks for joining us. If you're new to this podcast, first, welcome aboard. I'd also recommend you check out our webpage, the Internet of Things Madesimple.com, which has some great material on IoT, including links to over 60 previous podcasts, colorful and interactive ebooks, and blog posts. Finally, if you're enjoying this podcast, we ask two things. First, please consider subscribing to the podcast using your favorite podcast service, and if that podcast service allows you to leave a comment or review, kindly do so. In this episode, we're going to explore a topic that might seem counterintuitive to what I've been talking about for much of the past year. Is the smartening of cities and municipalities actually not a good idea? For over 60 episodes, I've preached all about the benefits of an IoT solution for both your personal life, for your car, and while at work. However, today, we're going to look at some of the possible reasons why it may not make sense for your city or region to go down this path. Before we get started, this podcast was based on a wonderful New York Times article written by, and I hope I get the name right, Shoshana Said, who is an assistant professor of civil and mineral engineering at the University of Toronto. Let's get started by talking about the first possible issue, obsolescence. I think most of us have a good understanding of what this means in terms of technology. I mean, many of us barely finish paying off the iPhone we're using, only to find out that there's a much better one available. It's always faster, lighter, more features, you name it. In theory, this could be a major issue with going to a smarter city, at least according to Professor Said. Cities are based on things lasting an awful long time. Think bridges, tunnels, subways, and more. They're all decades old. The theory is that the current technology will be obsolete in, say, 5 years, and there's going to be a constant upgrade cycle. In reality, I'm going to grade this as being partially true. Sure, there's always going to be computing devices with faster data speeds, cellular networks with faster data throughput and lower latencies, and software is always bringing about new features. Most consumers tend to chase those things a lot. Probably too much for their own good, but definitely a lot. However, this is not the case for many in the business and definitely in the government world, who often adopt the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. They're always late to the upgrade game to the latest OS on devices and will use systems as long as possible. The concern that they'll have to be replaced often may be a valid one, but just not as much of a concern as was pointed out in this article. The second issue, one that is touched upon in the article, is both reliability and security. The old method of recording things on paper was definitely far from perfect, as it often had large clerical efforts and slow process time. However, it was often protected from outside attacks and tended to have a decent level of reliability, assuming you could read the person's handwriting. One of the first podcasts that we did, it's in our preview area, was about elections and why, even in this time of incredible technology, we should still be using paper ballots for the time being. The same holds true for the smart city in some cases. Take traffic lights. Most municipalities have started to move towards using internet-based technology to communicate with the lights. But many are trying to lengthen the time in place of older networks because they weren't as easy to hack, because they weren't available to the outside world. Yeah, there are definitely things that cities can do to secure their devices, and most of them are going to work fine in offline mode if there was not connectivity, but it does show an area of vulnerability. Are these issues that can be overcome and still use IoT? I definitely think so, but I do totally agree that caution needs to be taken and that we need to move forward only on solutions where IoT truly has an established and measurable benefit. Let's not just chase the shiny object. The next point has to do with the number of possible failure points. Professor Said points out in the article that there are possible failure points if sensors were to fail, like the ones detecting high water levels from storms. While I see where they were going, I do have to disagree with this thesis. Sensors are part of our everyday life. I mean, cars are basically tens of thousands of sensors with wheels. We also trust much of our healthcare and hospitals to the idea of sensors. I think there are sensors that offer enough reliability here, as long as the purchasing staff buys the level of product that is needed for a particular project. The idea of sensors does bring up another potential issue. Think about millions of sensors in a city. Every garbage can, section of asphalt and sidewalk, streetlight, and more. What happens to all this data? It's definitely a problem. Yeah, there are solutions that allow filtering of data, but sending back and forth data requires tremendous processing power and data network capacity. While this is a problem that I believe will be overcome, it does have to be taken into account. There's another issue, however, that might be a bit more difficult to overcome. There's a major shortage of talent in the field of data analytics and management. These employees, as the article correctly points out, are far more expensive than the average city worker. But I do think that once systems are set up, the costs themselves will stabilize. It does mean that cities may have to hire people that they don't have previous experience in hiring or contract these services out to outside companies. The final area we're going to cover is, even if we overcome these issues, is it even worth it? One of my favorite lines in the article is that even with smart solutions, somebody still needs to pick up the trash, at least for now. The thinking behind this statement is that there are dumb or non-smart alternatives that may indeed offer a better return on investment in many cases. I do tend to agree that in some cases, a smart solution is not always the best value. As I stated earlier, a city needs to ensure there's a true return on investment before proceeding. The example of a smart garbage can is an interesting one. Professor Said points out that garbage still needs to be picked up, and an experienced employee is good at knowing when to do so. Here is where I disagree a little bit. Sure, for now at least, you still have to pay a human to offload the garbage can, but that employee cannot be everywhere. An optimized sensor-based system would not replace the worker, but would give them better information to be able to do their job more effectively. As I've stated many times, and will continue to do so, IoT is all about information, not replacing people. The final point that is pointed out is that there are often simple solutions that can help as opposed to more complex ones. To improve traffic, as an example, a city could install better transit, bike lanes, and other solutions. No one's disagreeing that these things will help. However, IoT helps beyond those by doing things like letting the drivers know of traffic issues, bad road conditions, and optimizing traffic light patterns using current and not historical data. I see no reason why these two ways of thinking need to be in conflict. You can use IoT solutions and install more bike lanes if that's a desired path. You can use sensors to let employees know which pipes need to be replaced first, and smart sensors let police know of gunshots in areas before the call comes in. Are these solutions perfect and above any chance of failure? Of course not. But that's why you have the combination of experienced team members and backup services. As I spoke about in an earlier podcast about pilots who are no longer able to fly without systems available, you need to have fallback plans for key systems that we all rely on. Otherwise, we are in big trouble. To summarize, like I said off the top, I did like Professor Said's article. We need intelligent people like this to ensure we are going to move forward at the right pace when it comes to technology. We need to always question what we're doing. As always, I'd love to hear what you think, good, bad, and ugly. The first place to start is our Facebook page, The Internet of Things Made Simple. If I'm connected to you on LinkedIn, drop me a note through that service. And if I'm personally connected to you, drop me an old-fashioned email or text. We look forward to having you join us for our upcoming 4-part series that walks a company through all aspects of the IoT journey. Many thanks. Take care. I'm Larry by Humor.